Good morning, Mr. Rob McCord, current state treasurer of Pennsylvania and current candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. How are you doing today?
I am doing just fine, and it's fun to be on the line with somebody else named Rob. I'm hoping to help keep the taxpayers from getting robbed.
I like that. Before we conduct this interview, I would like to thank you for your time and taking time out of your busy campaign schedule. And I would like to ask you a few questions, which should take no longer than 15 to 20 minutes of your time.
Sure.
Okay.
And I'm happy to do it. Good for you for doing the work yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. First question. What is your political background?
My political background also stretches into my personal and business background. I am very lucky that I got a lot of education in a lot of different ways preparing for this run for governor, and I'm realizing that probably the most important patch of education was before I was 10 years old, in that I got to watch what my mom went through. My mom was well educated, and we thought she was economically secure, but she went through a tough divorce when I was 4 out in California, and had a very, very tough time. Lost a job, almost got evicted, got help, frankly, from a union, and also was going to go home to her home state of New York State when she got a call from a friend in Pennsylvania, an openly gay friend in 1968. This is before Stonewall. Said that, to my mom, Joan, you stood by me during my crises. I want to make sure I'm there for you. I want to be sure you take a look at a job that we have for you at a place that was then called Drexel Institute of Technology. And she wanted to look at it not just because it was a good job, but because it was there was a great school district 15 minutes from campus, Lower Merion. And I'll tell you, when we moved to the Lower Merion School District, everything got better for me. I went from undiagnosed dyslexia and the slow reading group to being able to do well enough over time to sort of tunnel my way into Harvard with financial aid and to enjoy the American dream. And I love moving around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania saying that it was Pennsylvania public education that rescued me as a little boy and made everything possible for me. So the beginning of my political background is my background as a kid, watching a good woman, my mom, work hard and play by the rules, but nevertheless suffer from acute economic insecurity, and then watching how she moved to a great school district. We often were sort of the least affluent household on the block, but she knew enough to move to a great public school district, and that ultimately rescued me. And that was sort of the beginning of my education. And then I got very lucky. She married a brilliant man when she remarried, and things got better and better with my father, and I got a lot of education from smart people, all of whom were teachers and professors, by the way. And then I got a great education at Harvard. I studied microeconomics. I learned a lot about market signals, and not just theory, but theory and practice. And then I was lucky enough to get a bunch of great jobs on Capitol Hill. I became a chief of staff at a young age. I was a budget analyst at a young age. And ultimately, I was CEO of a bipartisan think tank. And that was a terrific opportunity because I took a look at the long-term policy implications of emerging demographic trends, but also of new technologies. And we tried to study issues before they'd become sort of acutely ideological or partisan. And that, by the way, was the beginning of my work on global climate change. It was the beginning of my work on the public implications of the developing Internet. I mean, this is all sort of in the 1980s. It was fascinating. Then I was lucky to be guided to go and get an MBA, frankly, as opposed to a law degree or a PhD. The Democratic Party had a lot of professors and a lot of lawyers, but to be an entrepreneur and a business leader and a job creator who was also a progressive was my ambition, and I was lucky enough to get into Penn's Wharton School, arguably the best MBA program in the country, and I think probably the best for entrepreneurs. And I had a great time there, and I was able to go to work for a legendary man named Pete Musser, a famous Lehigh grad, and I was able to have several privileges in the business world. I was able to become financially independent, which is something we all aspire to. But I also had the high privilege first of helping to create thousands of jobs, working with great, brilliant people, and learning a lot about a lot of different industries. And second, frankly, I saw my share of people who had a lot of cash in their pockets, but in their bank accounts, but they suffered from a different kind of poverty, a poverty of purpose. And I thought, you need to be committed to your community and not just committed to making money. And that helped inspire me to run for treasurer. And my background in the Treasury is, widely noted. I got endorsed across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for our pioneering innovative work, rescuing the PA 529 program, by the way, to make college more affordable, a $400 million problem that we successfully addressed, and help protecting seniors and their benefits, their retirement annuities. I was very successful as an investor. And I also became a muscular fiscal watchdog, and we increased the returns to taxpayers and the returns from operations in Treasury. So I was very proud of all that. And then finally, one bit of sort of sad political education is I realized that too much of my time was spent in common sense battles with Tom Corbett. And while we were winning a lot of those battles, fighting for adult basic health care coverage, battling bad crony capitalist bills that were coming into Treasury, defeating Tom Corbett, at least in the first round, on a crony capitalist approach to privatizing the lottery in a way that would have hurt seniors, I realized at the end of the day, if we didn't defeat and evict Tom Corbett, and especially invest again in education at every level, early childhood, K through 12, and post at least those first 2 years of post high school education, we weren't going to protect working people in Pennsylvania. And I realized, and again, this is a fundamental point of political education. I was not going to be able to say that the kids in Pennsylvania had the same opportunity that I did when I was a kid. So that's sort of a summary of all of my political background.
Wow. Might I say is very dense. Very dense.
Yeah. Well, what I'm proud of is I've been at the bottom and middle and top of a lot of barrels, and I've rolled through a lot of different situations, and I've learned a lot. And I feel like that formal and informal education has blessed me. And I know we can do better. I mean, your fellow students will graduate soon, and I want to help create a Pennsylvania that is better for you and your fellow students. So you have something that's better than what we have now, and you face immense opportunities yourselves, just like I did.
Wow. Yes. Your political background also qualifies you as governor of PA, being treasurer and having opportunities and working in a financial background as well. And as you mentioned, graduating my fellow class, I'm actually a senior.
Oh, good for you. What are you majoring in, Rob?
I major in communications. I switched 3 times. I had to find myself, and almost picked up a minor in economics as well.
I like to argue that life is less about finding yourself than creating yourself. So good for you.
Thank you. But one of your platforms, I assume, would be education.
Oh, the core of my cause is to invest again in education and job creation. Everything connects to education. Yes. Tom Corbett's tragic cuts to K through 12 education, the $1 billion of cuts, are not just hurting the students of today and the employers of tomorrow who need to recruit. It will hurt us in terms of recruiting job creators to Pennsylvania, and we need to not just restore that money. We need to invest in early childhood learning, where there are immense returns to people, and we, of course, need to invest again in college education, in state schools and state-related schools, and we need to work with people to make higher education more affordable, and in some cases to help people get some training, go out into the workforce for a few years before they finish their 4-year degree, but make sure that they're getting degrees that are useful in the paid workforce. So again and again, I returned to investing in education, and I was the only candidate who on day one of my campaign said this is by far my highest priority.
Yes. And, what will you do for students to help pay off college debt and make it easier and affordable for students to attend school? Because, granted, I'm in a six-figure debt from attending Kutztown University,
Right.
and I have aspirations of attending UPenn for my master's.
Right.
So, what will you do for students in that predicament?
So the first part of the answer when it comes to helping students with student debt is, let's be careful not to overpromise and underdeliver. I mean, part of my political education flows from the fact that I'm not a career politician. I've been a business leader. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been a student. I've been a student with debts. I used to get so annoyed with politicians who during campaign season would promise the sky and the moon without any idea of whether or not it was really plausible to get it passed or funded. So part of what we would look at is saying we need to improve the employment environment in Pennsylvania so that you can get good jobs with good compensation packages that make your current debt burden affordable. Second, I would explore providing discounted debt or grants for people who choose to stay in Pennsylvania. Remember, somebody who has a debt and leaves Pennsylvania and says, I'm going to go be a gym teacher in Arizona, I mean, that's nice, and they're absolutely free to do that. But the return to Pennsylvania on that education is much lower than if somebody gets a degree in accounting or engineering and says, I'm going to stay right here in Pennsylvania and generate income, generate tax revenue, and hopefully in the long run generate jobs, become a job creator. That kind of a career in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is worth something to the people of Pennsylvania. And I think in a very fair and just way, we can go to all the taxpayers of Pennsylvania and say, for the students who don't come from affluent households and the student who don't have the blessing of a high current income, if they are staying on track to generate many times the cost of their debt in tax revenue over time, let's give them an incentive to stay in Pennsylvania. So I would explore that on a bipartisan basis. I strongly believe in state schools as well as investing, again, in state-related schools, because I point out to people the state-related schools, as great as they are, and I'm a huge fan of the state-related schools, they have a blended mission. They don't have as their core mission to make a great four-year degree affordable for Pennsylvanians. And the state schools have that as their core mission. So we need to be helping students finish their four-year degrees on time and as affordably as possible, get training in things that will lead to jobs, help them get jobs. The state itself and the state government has a stake in that. And finally, what you would have is an entrepreneurial, highly engaged governor in a Rob McCord who would be working to work innovatively with these state schools to ask the questions about how your public servants can help young people get jobs, stay in Pennsylvania, and pay for their education many times over.
Oh, wow. I'm in full agreement with that. Yes.
Now, where are you from, Rob?
Well, I'm from Philadelphia, Mount Airy, Philadelphia.
Good for you.
Thank you.
And by the way, when it comes to getting master's degrees and so forth, I agree with those who suggest that it's often wise to go out into the paid workforce for a little while and get work experience before you get that next degree if you can.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that many times too. I think I'm going to take to that advice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I plan to go to UPenn for my master's in public health, but I need more work experience in public health. So.
Mm-hmm. Good for you.
Yes, thank you. What are your other positions and platforms that?
Well, first of all, I think when people start to talk about investing again in job creation and education, they have an obligation to talk about how they're going to pay for it. One of the things that I've really disliked about the Corbett administration is they had misguided policies, and then they got wildly disengaged from a real-world conversation about the implications of those policies. And finally, when they doubled back in a campaign year to say, okay, we do want to try to do the right thing for at least a fraction of students and working people, they sort of wave their hands when they're talking about where their money will come from, and you realize they have no idea where they will get the money. The first bit of work is to invest again in education and to have tax reform that makes that affordable. I'm certain that I can build the consensus for a realistic 10% driller's tax. And part of what's good about this is, first of all, it's real reform. You'd repeal and replace bad law, the local impact fee. Tom Corbett's been told by the courts what the people already knew. The local impact fee was bad law from the beginning. Second, people need to understand that natural resource of natural gas cannot be removed from Pennsylvania without creating jobs in Pennsylvania. So unlike many tax burdens which are imposed on the citizens of Pennsylvania and could lead to an erosion of job creation, and I'm acutely sensitive to that as an employer myself and as somebody who's invested in a broad array of businesses in so many industries. But what's unique about a natural resource extraction industry is they cannot export those jobs. And further, the total cost of production, and all business leaders who are being smart say, I need to know the total cost of goods sold and then the price I can get. So the realistic drivers of economic activity are the price of natural gas and the total true cost of extracting and delivering that natural gas. Pennsylvania has been a low-cost platform in that regard, in part because of the transportation advantages, in part because of the geological advantages. And unfortunately, the Corbett administration has allowed the people of Pennsylvania to be ripped off in that regard. We have the boldest, best proposal on this front. It would lead to $1.63 billion in year one. So we would get to invest again, particularly in education, primarily K through 12, but also early childhood learning, and of course in higher education. So that's the central plank of my platform. We also embrace green economic development, innovative approaches to job creation, providing risk capital to entrepreneurs that pays for itself many times over. Look at the data in the Ben Franklin program. And generally, what people would have in a McCord administration is an invest and innovate-oriented governor whose mission and obsession is to create opportunities for Pennsylvanians, increase economic security for all Pennsylvanians, and to do that first and foremost by investing in education and job creation.
Okay. I want to talk to you about, I want to ask you about the minimum wage crisis. And, this is something from USA Today. According to USA Today, fast food workers went on strike and, they protested against McDonald's, chanting, quote, unquote, quote, we can't survive on $25 an hour, unquote. And, the protest basically is fight for $15 an hour. What is your take on minimum wage as it stands now?
First of all, the minimum wage is far, far below $25 an hour, so we should sort of double check what they're really what their chant related to. But I am deeply sympathetic to the fast food workers who've been protesting. And fundamentally, when people look at the McCord candidacy, one of the things that's exciting to them is we have bigger, bolder ideas, particularly as it relates to the driller's tax and, yes, drum roll please, the minimum wage. What is important to understand about the minimum wage is that we now have the evidence that raising the minimum wage in most contexts does not destroy jobs. In fact, within the borders of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, a rapid increase in the minimum wage would lead to an increase in the amount of job creation because, of course, these minimum wage earners are much more likely to spend 99% of their income inside the borders of Pennsylvania. So what you're doing, and I say this as a business leader type, what you're doing is you're taking cash off the balance sheet of a McDonald's or a Walmart's and putting it in the pockets of minimum wage workers. Those corporate headquarters are located outside the state of Pennsylvania. The minimum wage workers are located inside Pennsylvania. And we looked long and hard at the data, including data that flowed from the 1990s when New Jersey raised the minimum wage and Pennsylvania didn't. And there was no bad effect on jobs whatsoever, and it was very carefully measured. And we said, you know what? We can afford to go promptly to a $10.70 minimum wage. and that we are going to do that right away in year one, which, by the way, lifts the most people out of poverty promptly, including, we believe, 16,000 parents who are working full-time but nonetheless living below the poverty line. And lifting those families out of poverty, of course, has a multi-generational implication. We did do a carve-out for teenagers and for tipped workers, although we move up promptly the minimum wage for tipped workers. But I do believe there are family-run restaurants and more small enterprises where you need to be sensitive to the fact that some of the compensation flows in the form of tips, and you don't want to accidentally hurt those smaller restaurants and firms. But when you're looking at these large companies like McDonald's, it's just wrong that we aren't defending the negotiating power of these minimum wage workers against these large corporations to drive up their take-home pay. And we're only driving it up, by the way, to the purchasing power that the minimum wage provided in 1969, decades before we had so much evidence that raising the minimum wage would not hurt jobs. A lot of us struggled. I struggled in college thinking about it, thinking this is a trade-off between job creation and fighting poverty for working people who want the dignity of work. But in the long run, what we're finding is you're not just getting the dignity of work, and you're not just fighting poverty, but you're improving the quality of the economy overall, and you're improving the supply of jobs in Pennsylvania by being progressive and pioneering on this front. And frankly, I have the background, the business background, to be able to make the case in a compelling fashion.
Yes. And as state treasurer, that's one experience that a lot of people can attest to.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I'm somebody who's met a payroll. I mean, I hope to have the high privilege, and I expect to, of being the Democratic nominee. And when that happens, people are going to look at two candidates, and they're going to realize one of them took Pennsylvania from top tier to bottom tier in job creation. One of them took Pennsylvania from progressing rapidly in education performance to regressing. That person's name is Tom Corbett. And the other was rescued by Pennsylvania public education and helped to create thousands of jobs in the business world and actually understands job creation. And his name is Rob McCord. And in a McCord administration, people can trust that working people and students who don't come from super wealthy households will be well represented in the governor's office.
Very nice. And to run that quote by you again, it's we can't survive on 725.
On 725. Yes, that's exact. When you
quote.
said, I thought it said 25. Right. So first of all, it's obviously true that they cannot survive on $7.25 an hour. And guess what's happening? Those large, wealthy companies that are headed up by people who get paid tens of millions of dollars a year, guess what they're doing? They are accepting corporate welfare by paying that low rate. They are intentionally saying, we are not going to pay people a livable wage. We are going to pay them this low wage, and then they are going to go out and get public benefits, public subsidies. And what we see here is if we raise the minimum wage rapidly, we save government money. The burden on taxpayers, the average taxpayer, actually goes down because you will reduce dependency on public benefits from people who, in fact, are working hard. They are working 40 hours a week. So these people who are striking are absolutely correct and protesting. They're absolutely correct that we need a livable wage, and a McCord administration would be on their side. And in the long run, every taxpayer would benefit from reduced government costs and from increased demand that leads to an increased supply of jobs. Right. So thank you so much for your interest in our campaign. I think people, as they explore this, will realize that our candidacy, the McCord candidacy, is putting forward somebody who was rescued by public education, wants to do the most to help with job creation, and wants to help people with big dreams like you.
Yes, and in a lot of ways, there are similarities between us. I come from a middle-class home. My parents fought for me to get into high school with dual enrollment opportunities, and I took advantage of those opportunities and, just furthering my education and, making a income that I generate myself that's livable and I can survive off of.
Yep, it sounds like your parents did just the right thing. And look, I want to be clear. My mom only struggled for a few years, but boy, were those years instructive. I mean, by the time I was 11, I was lucky. By the time I was 14, I was in fantastic shape. Why? Both because my mom got a great job, and she got an advanced education that allowed her to get a great job, and she married a good man. I had a good stepfather, etc. But also, most importantly, I was in a great public school system. And so I never sit here saying, I was born in a log cabin, I built myself, or any of that. What I'm able to do is say, I understand the river of anxiety that flows through a lot of middle-class households. Yes. That people are nervous about their ability to pay bills. They're nervous about their ability to pay student debts. They're worrying about paying their own student debts at the same time that they start to think about trying to help their kids go off and get an absolutely essential higher education. They aren't even thinking about how to pay for reasonable vacations or retirement. And that is a common mainstream middle-class experience. More than half of all Americans can reasonably expect to get close to having 1 year between the age of 25 and 60 when they get close to the poverty line in terms of earning. Wow. Now, admittedly, that's not a decade in poverty, but boy, I can tell you from experience that creates a huge toll on a family, and we need to be doing more to create secure careers. We know people move from job to job, but people need to understand that if they work hard and play by the rules, they can enjoy economic security. And that's what we're working hard on. That's what your parents worked hard on. That's, Rob, what I believe you'll work hard on.
Yes.
So I should sign off now. My staff is pulling me to my next thing, but I did want to be responsive to you. Good luck to you, young man.
Okay. Yes.
Thanks.
And thank you for your time again. Thank you.
You bet. It's my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.